Okay, so my name is Amanda, and this is my husband, Alan. Alan ran for office in Pennsylvania, and we have recently relocated to Durrës, Albania, where we plan to live for at least a year. And then beyond that, we'll see. But we're thinking Albania is our new home and new country now. But we never really did a very good job of explaining what drove us away from the US. So in this video, specifically, we're going to react to the violent deaths of two people in Minneapolis at the hands of ICE and talk about basically how we feel about the political situation, which was a major I would say it was, I don't know, 80% of the.
It was 100% the reason we talked about leaving.
It was. I did want to leave. I did want to live abroad. I always wanted to live abroad. I wanted to live abroad even before Trump was elected the first time, but I had it in mind that I would go somewhere, live for a few years, become fully integrated, and then come back to the United States with that as having like just an experience under my belt. And now my outlook is I don't foresee myself going back to the United States, and I would prefer to become a citizen here, especially if Albania becomes part of the EU. Right. So, what do you have to say, honey? What do you want to tell people?
Well, you want to talk about Minneapolis, right?
I do.
So we had in our minds that we would arrive here sometime around the mid or end of September of this year. And we had a long process that we would pursue to get us here about that time. And we were well on that process, heavily invested in time and money and effort in that process when things started shifting rapidly in the States. And so we decided that that long, drawn out process was not the correct way for us.
Yeah, we were going to sail here. We were going to sail on our sailboat rather than fly into the country.
Yeah. But instead, after we watched the DOJ decide that the law is not something that the DOJ needs to comply with, we realized that things had the potential to devolve and unwind very quickly. And so on December 20th, we were on a new path. And by January 9th, we were here in Durrës. So a definite change in approach and time schedule. And we did it exactly at the right time and exactly right because Good was killed as we were leaving. And now Pretti has been killed as well. And we literally have the child raping, senile fascist dictators, stormtroopers executing Americans in the streets of US cities.
And then there's no effort to cover it up. In fact, if anything, with the rhetoric, there's an effort to capitalize on the intimidation factor, which means that they are going full court press when it comes to they are identifiably fascist. It is becoming a fascist police state. And it was becoming a fascist police state before these deaths. I think that, I mean, activists have been killed before. So, but what makes these deaths different is that there isn't a lot of song and dance on the part of the powers that be to, if anything, I feel like many more people are going to die because what they're telling people is we believe these people deserved to die. There's no respect for the Constitution. There's no respect for due process, and now there's no respect for life and limb and the basics of people's human rights. So it's the worst case scenario, but it's also, I almost feel like for liberals and for Democrats and for people who've left already or are thinking of leaving, there's a certain emotional, I don't even know how to describe it. In having been correct, right? We always said all along, this is why we're opposed to Trump, because this is what will happen. And I find it hard to fathom how people can be taken by surprise by this stuff. I mean, I don't know I don't have a good read on what Trump supporters' reactions to these things are, but there's a certain rage, a mute rage, but like a frustration that comes from having predicted that this would happen, then seeing it play out in real time, and the sense of powerlessness involved in. And I don't know, is it better or worse for you because we're here? Do you think us changing, because I don't think it really matters to me. I don't think it matters. I think you still have to do the work of processing this. And I don't really think there's any way around the negative emotions, right? That's not gonna like clear, there's nothing you can do. I don't feel like to get around how awful this is
Well, being here,
to witness.
being here is far better. I mean, I spent 24 years in the Air Force defending the Constitution against exactly this. I studied what foreign and domestic enemies of the Constitution would be like. I spent 20 years since I retired from the Air Force warning the country, and especially during my political campaign. I was giving speeches warning about the fascist aspects of Trump's administration in March of 2019. And I kept that up all the way through until he was defeated in 2020. And I kept it up demanding his prosecution for treason because he has been committing treason all through the Biden administration. And so when I was alone doing that year after year after year, with people condemning me, Democrats condemning me for being too strident and too vocal about this, too bellicose about demanding justice for January 6th, for example, and demanding that Garland do his damn job and that Biden do his damn job and make sure that this threat did not circle back and affect our country. After all of that, there's no way I'm going to live in the United States under the fascist dictatorship that I warned against and fought against for all those years. The people who didn't fight against it, it's fine that they get to live underneath that fascist dictatorship. They helped bring this about, whether through actions or inactions. But I'm not going to be there while fascist thugs are executing people like me in the streets of Minneapolis or anywhere else. And I've been the target of Trumpers during my campaigns. I've been the targets during my writing essays, et cetera, et cetera. The local branch of Trout Unlimited kicked me out because I wrote something that was accurate and contra to Trump.
Well, it's very chilling to me to see the deaths and also know that in various places, like what was the Miami woman who the mayor sent the police to her house because she posted something, was it that she posted something critical of him online, or another woman,
She exercised her First Amendment.
Right.
So the mayor sent the police to investigate her use of her First Amendment. No threats, no risk to him whatsoever, but he sent a police officer over anyway to ask her a few questions because she didn't share his political opinion.
Was this woman separate from the woman who wrote "I would like to see them all tried" about?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I do feel better. I mean, I feel better overall. I think that what we've done here, political drivers aside, what we've done here has boosted our quality of life multiple times over, right, by coming here for various and sundry reasons. And I do feel safer having come here. But it's chilling to me that, well, I could have predicted that activists would die. But I'm talking about is I struggle with first understanding why what happened to me in 2019 when I was investigated by the Secret Service, the FBI, and the ATF. I was the subject of what's called a threat assessment investigation. And when I look back on that, I actually feel like that was a tremendously a stupid thing that I brought on myself. But I'm very grateful that it happened when it happened, that it happened in the first administration, because what I did to trigger that was basically write emails to the CIA suggesting that one or both of the Trumps be eliminated because they are a threat to national security. Because I believed at the time that there was a high likelihood, particularly that Melania had a shady past, and that with the entire encircling of Donald Trump as a candidate by Russian intelligence, the whole influence campaign, which actually was a thing that happened and not just a media hoax, in my opinion. But I found that both of them were just very sus and at least had to have been compromised, if by Russians, if not outright cooperating treasonous partners of Putin. And how that whole thing happened to my country it boggled my mind, and it insulted my sense of patriotism enough that I reached out. And then I did a terrible thing, was I brought this investigation on myself. They came to my home, they interviewed me, they took my picture, they asked me to sign a waiver releasing all of my medical records to them. And then that became like a check on me. It became a real check on my behavior going forward. And so when it came to participating in protests, I was a little gun shy, and I would go out and protest. And it's just so sad to me to see activists dying for activities that are actually far more innocuous than what I myself did. But it infuriates me that now the same level of scrutiny, which I would say in my case it was maybe much more warranted. In these other cases, it's just flat out unconstitutional violation of Fourth Amendment, intimidation by fascists, by a government that is fully fascist, has completely departed from the government that so what I'm saying is, being here, I do feel like, okay, there's a buffer, at least there's a giant buffer of geographic distance between, I pose no threat to anybody in the administration. Okay. I'm trying to live my life. We were terrified that something would happen to one or both of us. I was afraid that I would be immediately arrested, that the outcome of the investigation during the first term didn't lead to an arrest warrant. And I was afraid that they would harden the lines, which they clearly have hardened the lines, because now we're seeing in explicit written documents that the White House is issuing that they believe that they have the authority to investigate and imprison and detain people for being political opponents. So I know what the stress of being investigated felt like for me, And I accept that. I sort of brought that on myself. I sort of deserve that. But when I read about this woman just writing, I can't wait for them to all be tried. And hear that somebody sent law enforcement to her house to do to them what to do to her what was done to me. That makes me fucking furious. Insanely furious, because it's so clear cut. It's so clear cut. And when we came here, since we've been here, people want to know why. And we're still getting ourselves, we're still getting our bearings socially, I would say. For me, it's an awkward conversation to have, especially with young Albanians, about my country of origin and why I came here. Because I said to a woman who was cutting my hair, actually, my country is in a civil war. We came here to escape a civil war. And because the news doesn't frame it like that, I I have this feeling like, oh, people think I'm crazy, I'm a nut, and yet they don't say so. And I don't know, is it I don't know what they think about uh, whether or not our reasons for leaving were justify the flight. But I tell you, oh, the Ukrainians, they get it. There are Ukrainians who live in our building, and I was in the elevator with two gentlemen from Ukraine, and they introduced themselves, and I said, "I'm so sorry that my country failed to defend your country," and I said we left because of Trump, and we don't feel safe at home anymore. And the man actually from Ukraine actually said to me, "Your country is done. It's over." That's what he said. Your country is over. And I have to say, I concur, sadly. I feel safer, but what I'm saying is I don't know that I think when we were stateside, when we were still there, my primary concern was what is going to happen to me? What if they come back? What if they get me? What if I go to a protest and something happens? What if I'm swept up? What if they decide that they have cause? So their threat assessment, now I'm a higher level threat. I had all these fears and concerns about myself, my own person. And because of those fears and concerns, I didn't have a lot of bandwidth left to emotionally react to the deaths of others, to what was going on structurally. The complete, like, I just had to think, what do we need to do now? What do we need to do? What do we need to get done? And now that we're here, I think it's kind of different, because now I don't feel so much fear about my own person, but honestly, the rage and the sorrow over what is going on, that at times has felt worse to me. Does that make sense?
What we have now is, while Trump's fascist dictatorship, including his corrupt DOJ lies and gaslights about their murdering American citizens in the streets of Minneapolis, they are a kakistocracy, a government of the worst, the least qualified, the stupidest, the most incompetent. And Pam Bondi has released a letter to Minnesota saying essentially, ICE is going to be there and we're going to keep harassing your people until and unless you give us your voting rolls. Got nothing to do with immigration. They're just displaying power so that they can acquire even more power, including the means to corrupt the election in 2026 and 2028. So I I disagree that the country is over, but the Constitution is not in effect in the United States. That is not
So
the
this isn't-
supreme law of the country right now. The supreme law of the country is the whim from the child rapist, senile fascist dictator. Whatever his whim is at any given moment, that is the law of the land and will be the case until he's gone.
So it's not, but it's not, would you agree with me? It's not a constitutional crisis. It's a civil war. I don't understand these meaningless terms that have been generated from recent events, almost as a way of coping. It's almost like a way of people coping, or a way. I see a lot of euphemisms cropping up in news coverage that I associate with denial. Well, so what would you say to people, because people have said this to you online, that we don't care, because we left. So now supposedly because we left our country, we don't have one right to wait. We don't have we can't own our own emotions about the god awful.
One MAGA former Air Force colleague who forgets himself and forgets who we are wondered why I cared since I'm an expat, as if my oath no longer held
Because
any
you-
value to me, as if I had no concerns for friends and family still in
Right.
the United States or anything like that. He's MAGA and he's stupid, and this is what we expect from them.
Well, this stuff, it just really, I'm sensitive to it because of I felt like, okay, I should be fighting, but I couldn't find a way to fight in the States. Furthermore,
As I said at the beginning, I've spent 45 years.
but I didn't,
Well,
right?
that's fine.
So I didn't, what can I claim? I was a journalist once upon a time. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in the freedom of the press. That was one of my reasons for leaving that don't have directly to do with Donald Trump and escape. But moreover, for myself, I feel like it's again this pattern of me being quite precocious when it comes to these sorts of things. And then I have almost survivor's guilt over it, especially the more people die.
So let me pose this. What do you owe the MAGAs who are going to suffer from the government that they helped create? What do you owe those MAGAs?
And I think it's a matter of it's like, okay, it's a matter of principle. You fight for the principles that you believe are worth fighting for. And sometimes people are absolute shits, and their level of ignorance is such that, you might have a better idea of what's good for them, right? To be so presumptuous, right? But I had this, when I did my union campaign, I eventually ended up there was a moment in time when I lost, and I fucking hated the people. I hated them.
Yeah.
Because they were so stupid. They were so stupid.
They're still so stupid.
But then I look back on it and I said, so then I had a moment and I said, stupid people deserve better lives too.
Sure.
People who do.
But you can't give them better lives.
But I can't. I know. Right. So that was the powerlessness. And then furthermore, for me, I just have to say, if I had stayed in the States, if I had done anything to raise my head, if I hadn't kept my gaze down, right? Then if I had become once again the subject of an investigation and get myself involved in some sort of resistance group, first of all I would do with my situation being what it is would be to bring greater scrutiny to whomever I'm involved with and potentially jeopardize their resistance.
We have an old saying in politics and international relations and just about anything these days. When your opponent is digging a hole, don't stop them. So what we have as of today is the the fascist Trump administration telling the country that the last person they executed in Minneapolis was wrong because he had a gun. And so now gun groups, even right-wing gun groups like Gun Owners of America and certainly the NRA, are all appalled and confronting the administration over its anti-gun rights stance because, frankly, no administration of any type has ever presented this kind of thing to them. And this was predictable because Trump forecast this in his first administration. He was talked about taking guns, and somebody said through due process, and Trump said, oh, I prefer taking the guns first and then doing the due process. And here he is telling people that they're wrong to have guns, to have possession of guns, to exercise their Second Amendment, after he's also overrun their First Amendment and their Fourth Amendment, and he's fighting in court to overrun their 14th Amendment. Because again, the US Constitution doesn't hold right now only the whim of Donald Trump, senile, child raping, fascist dictator Trump. That's the law of the land.
And it does seem that they continue to do things that inflame veterans, specifically veterans.
Everybody. That's just
Pretti
everybody gets their turn.
ICU nurse.
Everybody gets their turn.
And he was treating veterans. He worked for the veterans.
Yeah, they didn't plan that. They didn't plan that.
They don't plan that, but it seems to me that I have seen veterans participating. Before we left, I saw veterans at protests, they being quite visible, and Sons of Liberty is the channel that I watch daily just to keep my head on straight and just to keep, from breaking down. And he's a veteran because veterans have to think about these things because they have to think about why they're doing what they're doing.
But veterans are generally a group, although he did insult everybody who served in Afghanistan just this week. Generally, he doesn't plan to hurt veterans, but he does plan to hurt farmers. He hurt farmers in his first term, and then he repeated exactly what he did to hurt farmers in the first term in the second term. And so he's cost farmers $44 billion, and he's going to give them $12 billion. So, hey, sorry, you're out $28 billion. Good luck.
But I just feel like if there's any hope of the country,
$2 billion.
I think if there's any hope for mass organized resistance, and if there's any hope for really stopping this full court press, it's fascist press, it's going to be with active duty and former military and law enforcement.
Well,
it has, because they have to they have to make the distinction between what the federal government is about and doing now and the Constitution. It's their job. It's their job. It's not just their jobs. It's their identities, many of them. And if they fail in that, and they're armed. And they take the mindset that they're there to protect the rest of the population. If I start seeing more more and more police departments cooperating, falling in line, and more veterans being conscripted into ICE, and which I know that the ranks of Proud Boys and these militia upstarts, insurgents, they're basically insurgents against the government, right? So there's been a huge recruitment pipeline from the military to anti-government groups. But it seems to me that the majority of veterans could go the other way. And it's going to depend on them organizing themselves. And it's going to depend on them, basically law enforcement drawing a line. But I feel that by the time that those lines get drawn, that there will be armed conflict. There will be actually something that the rest of the world would be looking at and saying, this was the first battle in the Second American Civil War.
So I have a very different take on this. It stems from my participation in the Iraq War, which I thought was wrong before, during, and after. And the only reason I had to participate in the Iraq War is because our civilian-led military was ordered to go plan and execute that war. Our civilian-led military. The nation's failure, which is represented by going into Iraq, not the failure of the military, but the nation going into Iraq, is a failure of the civilian-led military, the civilian leaders, which is the president, yes, but it's also the people of the United States.
What about
It is the responsibility, no, not at all. It is the responsibility of the people to stop this kind of thing, and it will require the people of the United States, the civilians of the United States, to fix what's happening right now. If you're not going to get out in the streets, and you're not going to march, and you're not going to chant 8647 so he knows that it's his head you want, not Bondi's, not Gnomes, not Holman's, not any of them, that you want 8647, you want Trump's head, for him murdering people in the streets of Minneapolis. If you're not going to do that, then you're not going to be able to restore the Constitution. The Constitution will not be restored until that takes place. Plain and simple. Murders in the streets, executions of American citizens in the streets ought to be enough for you to oppose the fascist dictatorship. And if you won't, then you will live under the fascist dictatorship. That's how it goes.
Well, when I was there, I felt like there's this constant antagonism between the feelings of, the moral clarity and the outrage that liberals have. And when you say oppose, there was I got no sense that there was action or calls to action to do what? To protest? Because I felt like, oh man, I am so fucking over the protest shit. Like, please tell me what else to do.
This is why we fail. People do get over the protest shit.
Yeah.
You have to persist.
And now they have an even better reason, because now they can say, I don't want to get shot. Can you blame them? I didn't even want to be in the country because I didn't want to get arrested. I was absolutely confident that my odds of being shot, not very good. I'm sorry, I'm just not. But my odds of getting arrested,
I spent 18 months during a presidential campaign traveling around the eastern half of the United States, from the center of Iowa and Missouri and Minnesota all the way to Florida and all the way to New Hampshire and all points in between, over and over and over and over again. And I stood on street corner after street corner in 2018 and 2019 in hostile territory, holding up a sign that says, impeach Trump now, and facing criticism from maggots all over the country. And if you're not prepared to take risks like that, then you will be stuck with a fascist dictatorship. I've done my part. I did it for years. It's time for other people to do it. Plain and simple.
Right.
There is no other way. There simply is no other way.
If I had stayed, then people would just say, you are so stupid. How could you stay knowing what happened to me in 2019? Right? So I feel like I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
We did the right thing.
I just wish there was more that we could do. But here, inside the States, I didn't even feel like I could make this kind of video with you because I didn't feel like I could talk honestly about the 2019
You can work effectively from
investigation.
political exile.
And people need to know that happened to me and why. And I'm going to make another much more extensive video about what happened before and during and after and my thought process, because I'm not satisfied that I was wrong. I will say this, as awful as it is, I had a lot of shame in the years following them coming and asking me questions and photographing me and flagging me. I felt so ashamed that I had gone so far as to write what I wrote to the CIA. And yet also weirdly proud of myself that I came up with that idea to do that, because it wasn't something I posted online. I was like, you have these powers and you have these responsibilities to the American people. And as an American citizen, I can write to you with feedback, suggestions, and ideas. And my idea was you need to end this now before it gets even worse. And I thought my legal rationale there was that if one or both of them truly were a foreign asset or a foreign agent, I understood that to be a felony, right? I understood that there was some kind of interference going on and just didn't see why we should suborn that and didn't see why, we shouldn't just fucking assassinate one of them. I just think it's insane what's going on. We've lost the ball. We've completely lost control of literally what the United States is. So that is undermined. This is existential damage. This is not at all superficial. This is not cosmetic. This is not a cultural misunderstanding. So in the years since, after Biden got elected, and when I thought, there were a handful of years there where I thought that Trump had not a chance in hell of getting reelected. I felt ashamed of my suggestion. I was like, they must think that I'm the most, but I didn't care anymore. Once he got reelected and I saw what was going on, I was like, actually, no, that sentiment was pretty spot on. I mean, now what you gonna do? And I have no shame, none. Watching what's gone on has removed any shame that I feel about making the suggestion that lethal force be used against one or both of the Trumps. None. I will not apologize. I will not take it back. I do not give a fuck. This needs to stop. So that's been the good thing for me. That's been a silver lining, the lack of shame.
Sure, we can end it there.
Okay, all right. 8647.
8647.
We love y'all. Please take care.